And now, Your Honor, I believe we will go to reading the victim's statement. First, we will have our victim's advocate, Katie Dutton, reading Matt Druzba's sentencing statement. I believe she's outside, so I'm just going to go grab her.
And Ms. Graysick, just so I'm clear, and I apologize if I missed this, the state's request, I gather, is the cap in the plea agreement?
Yes,
So it's 6 to 10 years suspended
split
or
to serve.
split to serve, I'm
3
sorry,
years.
split to serve 3 years with a 12-year term of probation.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Dutton, thank you.
I'm sharing this statement on behalf of Matthew Druzba, husband of the late Cecile Druzba. It is difficult for me to write this statement without writing a book because there is so much to share. Other than my wife, Cecile, my brother-in-law, Jacques, who was a passenger in the car, as well as my children and I, we are the primary victims in this criminal case. Cecile and I had been together for over 25 years when she was killed. We were happily married and starting our empty nester life. We were looking forward to our golden years together wherever it took us. At the time of the crash, 2 of my kids were in their 20s and my youngest was a senior in high school. As you can imagine, our lives were severely impacted and devastated on March 22nd, 2019. Our lives have never been the same since, not even close. Our lives have not recovered to date, and I suspect they never will. Cecile was very healthy and had at least another 35 plus active and dynamic years ahead of her. My kids will undoubtedly feel the devastating impact of this incredibly senseless and tragic crash for the rest of their lives, for perhaps more than 70 years each. Cecile was the glue of our family. She managed all social activities from school events to holiday festivities and weekend activities. She always ensured that our kids were all included and present. Following the crash that took Cecile's life, much of my family's life has been negatively impacted. The following is a partial list of impact. My family has drifted apart. We have not been together in one place as a family since the summer of Cecile's death in 2019. As mentioned, Cecile was the glue to our family. We all currently live in 4 different states across the country. My kids have been in therapy at one time or another because of the trauma of losing their mother. Therapy is still needed. 2 of my 3 kids have not been able to continue with their college studies and have dropped out. I had not been able to finish the renovations on our home that Cecile and I bought together. My motivations for working on the house ended with Cecile's death. I have since sold the house. We had purchased the home in part as our retirement home. My 2 youngest kids are struggling in life without their mother. Cecile's death has had a tremendously negative impact on my kids to this day. Financially, our family income has decreased by more than half. My wife was scheduled to start her new dream job at UVM the Monday following her death. She was turned down a dozen times for other UVM positions and was thrilled to finally have been offered a position. This job included health, ancillary, and life benefits, including college tuition benefits for my children. This all evaporated when Cecile was killed. Since Cecile is no longer around to share the support, professionally, I've had to scale back my job significantly in order to support my kids more directly. My career and income have taken a huge financial hit because of this crash. I've conservatively estimated my family has suffered approximately $300,000 so far in lost income, lost health and tuition benefits, memorial and funeral expenses, therapy expenses, moving and travel expenses, as well as lost career opportunities. If you compound future lost income and benefits, I am sure it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. Of course, the biggest and most devastating impact is that my wife, Cecile, is dead. The following is a partial list of the direct and real impact on Cecile and my family. Cecile is dead at 57. She was healthy and she had many more vibrant and energetic years ahead of her. Cecile will never have a holiday, a vacation, a birthday, a wedding anniversary, a work day, or even another breath. Cecile has already missed graduations, kids' proms, kids' successes and failures, and trips abroad. Cecile will never get to see her kids get married or meet her son or daughter-in-laws. Cecile will never know or hold her grandchildren, and her grandchildren will never know their grandmother. Cecile will never experience retirement or her golden years, and I won't experience the same with her. Our children will never share another family holiday, vacation, or birthday celebration with their mother. There are also many other people and groups who have been directly impacted by the crash and Cecile's death. Many dozens, if not a few hundred, of Cecile's family and friends have been impacted. I continue to hear about the profound and ongoing sense of loss felt by other family members as well as friends, week after week. Organizations Cecile was actively engaged with and volunteering for will no longer benefit from her passion and her participation. Some of the organizations she volunteered with at the time of her death include Booster Club, sports teams, local community events, South Burlington Planning and Business Committees, the Humane Society, as well as the ASPCA. There are plenty of community and civic volunteer activities and groups that Cecile would have volunteered for over the next 35 plus years. What a lost opportunity to all of these groups. Cecile enjoyed giving and volunteering. This was part of her DNA. This potential loss is immeasurable. I would also like to share with the state of Vermont and the presiding judge about an unsolicited action initiated 2 years ago, almost to the day. I struggled to cope and make sense of my wife's tragedy. I came to an understanding and acceptance within myself that would drive my initiation and support of a plea deal offer to the defendant. I asked myself at the time, what would Cecile have asked me to do with respect to this criminal matter resulting in her death? Knowing Cecile for over 25 plus years, I knew the answer quite readily. Cecile would have sincerely and passionately pleaded for something good to come from her death and senseless tragedy. As a result of this understanding and realization, I proactively contacted the state's attorney and the victim's advocate assigned to the case. A meeting was initiated, and after some discussion, I followed up and crafted a detailed email of my wishes and desires to initiate and support this plea deal offer. I know Cecile would have been pleased if the defendant and his life could be turned around in a positive way, despite being killed. Thus, something good coming from this tragedy. The primary elements within my supported plea deal offer included no jail time for the defendant, none, regular and verifiable drug tests, significant community service, and for the defendant to make regular presentations within the community to high schools and colleges regarding this tragedy and the lessons learned. If these proposed presentations could have saved at least one person from being killed by drug abuse or DUI, Cecile would have been happy and her life honored. All the defendant had to do was own up to what he did, be fully accountable, and plead guilty to both existing charges, particularly the DUI drug fatality charge. It is important to note for initiating the support of a no jail time plea offer, I lost favor with some family and friends, even to this day. They were, and they still are, adamant about pushing for the maximum penalty under the law for the DUI and gross negligence caused the death of my wife. I'd accepted this reality because I felt supporting this plea deal is what Cecile would have wanted me to do. I had come to know my support of a no jail time plea offer was a form of restorative justice. At the time, I was not aware of this type of remediation. I did come to realize that for restorative justice to be successful, both the defendant and the victim need to embrace the inherent restorative justice principles, the most significant being accountability. The prosecutors took the main elements and theme from my email and documents and crafted a plea deal offer, which I have not seen, but it was presented to the defendant through his defense attorney. I learned quickly that this plea deal offer was readily rejected. Upon hearing the offer was rejected, in a word, I was devastated. I was devastated not just because the offer was quickly rejected, but primarily because the defendant, after being presented with what I was told was a gracious offer, was not stepping up and being accountable for his actions. As we all know, the defendant's actions and series of events that led up to my wife's death are undisputable. 2 affidavits, police crash reports, witnesses, toxicology reports, and the defendant's own statements to Vermont state troopers confirm the truth. Secondarily, it was now clear to myself, my kids, and my family and friends that we would now have to suffer through many more months before this matter could be addressed and closed by the court. We couldn't move forward with our respective lives knowing this matter was continuing. We now know this has been an open wound for me and my family, which has continued for another 2 years, when it could have been closed as early as January 2020. Since my wife's death, now approaching 3 years, the defendant has been a free man. He's had the ability to go to work, enjoying birthdays, vacations, holidays with families and friends, perhaps spending time with a partner, getting married if desired, and generally living life. The defendant did not take ownership and full accountability for his actions, despite the overwhelming evidence of his felony criminal behavior. The defendant has not spent 3 seconds incarcerated, but my wife has been dead for nearly 3 years now and will be forevermore. For the record, nearly 3 years after Cecile's death and following my support of a no jail time plea offer, I am not pleased with the current and accepted plea deal. Everyone from the drug recognition experts involved to the witnesses and the defendant himself have known from the beginning that this defendant drove under the influence of multiple drugs, and he had multiple opportunities over the nearly 1 hour period he was driving to make the right decision and stop. Along the way to his place of work, the defendant was aware enough to make a purposeful stop to have another cup of coffee and turn his music up to counter the effects of consumption of unprescribed and illegal drugs. The crash was not the result of a momentary eye off the road incident. This crash took place after a long and protracted drive, while knowing he was under the influence, knowing he was feeling the drowsy effects from the cocktail of drugs consumed, stopping for coffee with multiple opportunities and time to do the right thing and stop driving. He chose not to stop, but to keep driving under the influence. The defendant killed my wife. This was not just gross negligence. This was a DUI drug fatality resulting as well. With not pleading guilty to the DUI charge as well, in my opinion, I feel the defendant is still not being fully accountable for his actions. The toxicology report, the crash report, and the 2 drug recognition trooper affidavits are haunting and unquestionable. Furthermore, to think the defendant is not a drug abuser when he had stated, and the toxicology report confirmed, that he had taken non-prescription forms of OxyContin, Klonopin, and Benadryl. I wasn't aware previously, but have come to learn why regular drug addicts take Benadryl. From the defendant's own statement captured in the supplemental affidavit, the defendant took Benadryl because OxyContin makes him itch. Of course, I am not a drug recognition expert, but in my opinion, a person who takes Benadryl to counter an itchy OxyContin effect is not an infrequent or casual drug user. Your Honor, I apologize for getting into the weeds with this statement. I know the content is to be relevant to a victim's impact statement, and I feel it mostly is. I, along with my kids, am a victim of this senseless tragedy, and the content and the facts and feelings and thoughts within this narrative are largely part of the impact I have been personally experiencing and is regularly circulating in my mind. One additional item which has been very impactful to me and my kids personally, as well as painful and disconcerting, is that we have not seen, heard, or sensed meaningful remorse from the defendant or his family. No remorse and no condolences. I understand there is court-ordered conditions for the defendant to not contact my family. However, this, in my opinion, was a very cowardly excuse to not communicate meaningful remorse in some way. I feel if there is a will, there is a way. Writing a letter and providing it to the prosecutors would have been one way to express this remorse. My family and my friends wrote 15 to 20 testimonials on the impact of losing Cecile that I shared with prosecutors, and I understand in turn were shared with the defendant to absorb. Throughout this case, there has been virtually no meaningful remorse communicated, and I would hope this would play a fact in the court's decision in determining the defendant's sentence for killing my wife. In closing, we have not had Cecile for 3 years, 3 holiday seasons, 3 summer vacations, and 3 birthday celebrations. Particularly after the rejection of our no jail time support, our no jail time offer, my family has suffered for another 2 years for a total of 3. We clearly know what the defendant's rights are, but what are the victim's rights in this very straightforward case? I personally would not be happy with the defendant serving anything less than the next 3 years in confinement. Considering all of the verified facts available, and with my family's previous and continued suffering, and the suffering for the rest of our lives, anything less than the defendant serving 3 actual years in jail would be a gut punch to me and my family and would dishonor my wife, Cecile, and her life. I'm not looking for vengeance or retaliation, far from it. All I would like for myself, my kids, my family, my friends, and the people of Vermont is proper accountability. An appropriate, meaningful, and lawful sentence is essential for me and my family to move forward with our lives at this point. My kids don't need any more trauma in their lives, and the defendant needs to be held fully accountable for his senseless, reckless, negligent, and deadly actions. The number of DUI drug-related deaths in Vermont continues to increase, and the people of Vermont deserve and need appropriate justice. I know you know this phrase, Your Honor, but if I may, and with no disrespect, justice delayed is justice denied, and after 3 years, this seems very appropriate. I have said my piece, Your Honor, and I trust it was heard. Regardless of agreeing or not with the outcome at the sentencing hearing, I will accept the court's ruling without reservation.